August 15th. The time is 3:02. With us today, we have Alderman Tolliver, Alderwoman Bade, Alderman Warman, Alderman Bugg, and myself, Alderman Franco. First item is 24-0576, approval of the minutes from the Finance Committee meeting held on July 25th, 2024.
So moved.
We have a motion by Alderman Warman, second by Alderwoman Bade. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody in public wishing to speak?
We do not.
Thank you. Next item is 24-0555, a resolution authorizing the city to accept a grant award of $52,592.89 from FY25 Violent Crime Intelligence Task Force FOID grant.
Good afternoon, Chair, Committee. Lieutenant Bill Rowley, the Administrative Services Lieutenant with the Police Department. This is our third year now that we've received a grant from the Illinois State Police. This year we're receiving a grant for $52,592.89. That's a maximum award. We're not encumbered towards that amount, but we're able to use up to that amount between July 1st of this year and June 30th of next year. And this is to reimburse us for any overtime details that we, or personnel costs that we incur while seeking to enforce Illinois' FOID cards or firearm or violent repeat offender details in relation to firearms rules. Last year we had around $37,000 that was awarded to us that we used. So this year they've upped it to $52,500. This is an award that the state determines based on their budget. And so as we did in the last 2 years, we were coming to the council asking for approval to accept this grant award.
Lieutenant, I'm sorry, how much did we spend last year? I missed that.
Roughly $37,000.
Okay, I didn't hear that, thank you. Questions or comments from the committee?
Motion to approve.
All right, so hearing none, we have a motion by Alderwoman Bay, second by Alderman Warman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And it passes 5-0. Thank you. Next item is 24-0559, a resolution authorizing the execution of a joint funding agreement with the state of Illinois, the execution of a Phase 3 construction engineering services agreement with Thomas Engineering Group, LLC, in the not-to-exceed amount of $201,635, and the appropriation of $530,000 of MFT funds for the Indian Trail resurfacing project.
Good afternoon, Tim Widener with the Engineering Division. I'll be presenting the next 4 items, which are all very similar, all resurfacing projects on the state letting in November for construction next year. We have obtained federal funds, 80% for construction and construction engineering. We performed a Phase 3 QBS, and we're asking on each item to basically approve joint funding agreement with IDOT to talk about the federal funds, an engineering agreement, and then MFT resolution for the MFT funds for local share. I'll primarily focus on the differences, but feel free to ask any questions. The first project is Indian Trail from Highland to 31. Probably the only thing unique about the construction on this project is we're going to add some curb where there is none. There's a little under half of the road doesn't have curb, so that's one unique portion of the project. Also, we selected Thomas Engineering to do the construction engineering, and we used that master task order that I think we brought before you about 8 months ago, where we basically have them on like a 5-year as needed. So this is one of the projects that we thought they'd be a good fit on, so we used that old QBS. So I'd be happy to dig into anything else on this project.
Any questions on this particular one?
So moved to approve.
We have a motion by Alderman Bugg,
Second.
second by Alderman Bate. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Next one is 24-0560, resolution authorizing the execution of a joint funding agreement with the state of Illinois, the execution of Phase 3 construction engineering services agreement with Civil Tech Engineering Incorporated in the not-to-exceed amount of $166,718, and the appropriation of $460,000 of MFT funds for the Ashland Avenue resurfacing project.
Yeah, and this is Ashland from 25 to Union, and it's pretty straightforward, no real wrinkles on this one.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, no questions or comments. We have a motion. I'm sorry, Alderman Bugg.
I do have a
Go ahead.
question. Thanks, Mr. Widener. On this one and a couple after this, you've done a great job in recent years on you know, getting this around to different engineering firms. We've used a number of them across the board. It's always good to have some variety. At least to me, I see what I believe is a newer firm kind of put in for this Gonzalez Companies. I haven't seen them in the past, and they finished second in a number of these. Have they submitted in the past, and what is your experience with them?
They used to be called ESI. I don't know if they just straight up switch names or combine with anyone, but a lot of the same ownership and staff there. So.
Okay. And we used ESI, but not very much.
Yeah, we selected them for the overlay in 2022. Nothing else is jumping to mind at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we had, any further comments or questions? We had a motion by Alderwoman Bate, I'm sorry, second by Alderman Tolliver. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Next one is 24-0561, a resolution authorizing the execution of a joint funding agreement with the State of Illinois. The execution of Phase 3 Construction Engineering Services Agreement with Strand Associates Incorporated in the not to exceed amount of $98,910, and the appropriation of $280,000 of MFT funds for the Liberty Street resurfacing project.
So this is Liberty Street from Eola to Commons. Probably one thing to note is there is a township omission in there that we're not paving. That the township actually is planning on doing a project there. They submitted plans. We've been trying to get an update on it, so we're not sure where it's at. I know they're having some gas main difficulties, but yeah, pretty much anything we don't do, the township is planning to do in short order. So.
Jim.
Questions or comments? Alderwoman Bate.
Thank you, Chairman. So the township area starts right at the train track till Eola? Is that the whole?
There is a section, but I think there's a church there
Yes.
that we do, that is ours, so, coming off of Eola, well, Eola is a county route, but coming off of Eola, we have a small stretch, then it's township, then, yes, starting on the east side of the tracks, going east, is back to us.
Okay, would you please let us know when they're planning to do it, once you have the information
Yes.
about
yep.
the updates on that side, like resurfacing, and also the train track is cities?
That's now within the city limits, actually.
So just east of train track, the
Right, that's
resurfacing will be
where
our
we'll start.
responsibility?
Right, and then
And
we'll go
just
to
the
the
west
east.
will be, okay,
Yep.
okay, thank you. So,
Any other questions or comments on this one? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
We have a
Second.
motion by Alderwoman Bate, second by Alderman Bug. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. And the next one is 24-0562, a resolution authorizing the execution of a joint funding agreement with the State of Illinois, the execution of Phase 3 Construction Engineering Services Agreement with H.R. Green Incorporated in the not to exceed amount of $138,503, and the appropriation of $480,000 of MFT funds for the Prairie Street resurfacing project.
So yeah, this also has a township portion, which we are paving, and I forgot to put it in the memo, and I'll update it before Cal. But about 2 months ago, we passed an IGA with the township that basically we would pay their portion and they would reimburse us for it. So the dollar values that I have in the memo about the city's share will be actually a little slightly less than that. But we still need to appropriate the full amount since we're front funding it and then asking the township for reimbursement.
So, Tim, my question on this, you know when this may start, and the reason I ask that is we got that Prairie Meadows project going on Prairie, and, you know, there's a lot of commotion about truck traffic and a lot of different traffic going on, especially since there's so many projects out west that are
Mhm.
pushing traffic to Prairie. So do we have any idea? I'm just trying to make sure that, you know, things are done in a sequential order so people aren't up in arms with all these things happening at one time, basically.
Yeah, it'll be next year for sure. I don't like all these to be working day contracts, so it kind of depends on the contractor. You know, we can't start charging working days until May, so some contractors like to start in April
Okay.
and take advantage of the free days.
Mhm.
Others, you know, might push it a little bit and start later in May.
Okay, so spring of some sort next year.
Correct,
Okay,
yes.
can you let me know about when that's gonna start? I mean, if you can give me a heads up to remind me about that, so I can let people know, depending on where one project is, I can say, this is how we're kinda looking at it, to make sure one is done before the other one starts, or what that may mean if they're not, that's
Yeah,
everything. Okay.
absolutely.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments on this one?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion by Alderwoman Bade,
Second.
a second by Alderman Tolliver. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes 5-0. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next item is 24-0565, a resolution authorizing the procurement of an additional fleet vehicle for the Aurora Police Department, amount not to exceed $60,000.
Good afternoon, Chris Linville, Superintendent of Fleet Operations. This proposal is to get a vehicle for the Public Information Officer. If you have any questions, I will answer.
I have a question. So it's a non-police vehicle. Do we know what type of vehicle it may be? And the reason I ask is because it's not police, is $60,000 a high amount for just a vehicle for somebody to get around town?
So at the moment, we're not exactly sure the make and model. That will, as soon as we get it approved, we can go forward with that to make sure it can do everything it needs to do for this.
Would this be kind of like an SUV for them to put stuff in the back at that type
I
of
would
a thing?
imagine so.
Okay. All right. Alderman Bug?
Yeah. To follow up on that, in the memo, it says that the last vehicle went over to another officer, probably lieutenant with staff.
Addition of a commander.
Additional commander, okay, lieutenant commander, okay. And with our change in ranks and that, are we gonna have additional needs that you know of, or maybe our officer here could help us with that a little
As far as
bit?
operations go, yeah, I would leave that up to,
Hi, Lieutenant Bill Rowley with the Aurora Police Department Admin Services. Yes, in fact, to answer your question, Alderman Bug, the vehicle that we did have allocated for the PIO spot was in fact given to the new commander's position when we brought that new commander on board. And at that time, we were in transition, still looking for a PIO. Now that we have one, we're actually renting a vehicle for him through enterprise rental. A condition of his employment was that we give him a vehicle, so we've provided him a rental vehicle in the interim. We do have plans to expand the police department in terms of our manpower. That's something that we're going to bring in front of finance here in a couple of months. We have an ongoing plan to expand our manpower and including our fleet as a matter of support. So there will be additional needs for vehicles. That's going to be presented to you here in a couple of months with a layout of the hows and whys that we're looking for.
Okay.
In terms of this vehicle here, this vehicle would be specifically for the PIO. It would not be a police package vehicle as in the past. It would not be something that we would end up taking from the PIO and putting it back in the fleet if we needed it. It's going to be a single-use vehicle for just the PIO.
Okay, so your, the future request is just gonna go through regular budget and?
Regular budget,
Okay.
and those would be police vehicles unrelated to this.
Okay, so with the movement we've had, say, in the last 4 to 5 months, right now, there's no additional needs?
Right now,
You're right.
nothing within the scope of this request, no, sir.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We got a motion by Alderwoman Bay, second by Alderman Warman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes 5-0. Thank you.
thank you.
All right, next one is 24-0578, a resolution authorizing the city to accept a grant award of $101,790 under a grant agreement between the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, Office of Energy, and the City of Aurora.
Good afternoon, Bob Lively, Water Production Division. So the Illinois IEPA Office of Energy is the grantor for this project. The funding comes via the Public Water Supply Energy Efficiency Grant Program. It's originally federal dollars that come from U.S. Department of Energy. That money was made specifically available to encourage water supplies or water systems to look at opportunities for energy efficiency upgrades within their operation with current equipment. It was kind of luck of the straw that this came along, and we had a project that was kind of already on the drawing board that fit this. I want to acknowledge Julie Franchino, the former grant writer, that did great work in helping us get through this process and obtain the grant. Specifically, the funding is going to support upsizing of a finished water pump at the treatment plant that pumps water to the high-pressure system throughout the city. So to help get us a new motor that's more efficient, a new pump, and electrical modifications that are required to go with that.
Questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Motion to.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Bates, second by Alderman Bug. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is 24-0597, a resolution authorizing the city treasurer to accept on behalf of the city a donation in the amount of $30,000 from the Huntington Foundation for the Financial Empowerment Center.
Good afternoon, Martha Paschke, Director of Innovation and Strategy in the Community Services Department. This is a grant from the Huntington Foundation for $30,000 to support the work at the FEC, at the Aurora Financial Empowerment Center. It is the 4th award from the Huntington Foundation, so we greatly appreciate their continued support of the efforts to support the community in financial empowerment. We did receive grants from them in June of '22 in the amount of $50,000, in December of '22 in the amount of $40,000, in October of '23 in the amount of $40,000, and so this makes the 4th grant from the Huntington Foundation, and we appreciate their support.
The only question I would have is that the trend is going down. Do we know if there's a reason for that?
I am not sure.
Okay.
It's also, it's not at regular timing
Yeah.
either.
Okay.
So we just work to cultivate that relationship and
Okay.
hope that we can see that number tick back up.
Sure. Sometimes there's a reason, sometimes this could be on there, and I just didn't know if we were aware of anything that we could get it back in maybe good graces again, whatever the case may be, but, okay.
We're doing what we can to
Sure.
cultivate the
Okay.
relationship.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion by Alderwoman Bates, second by Alderman Tolliver. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 24-0598, a resolution authorizing the city to accept an energy efficiency incentive in the amount of $19,849 from ComEd for energy conservation measures incorporated into the design and construction of the new public works facility.
Good afternoon, Ian Wade with the Engineering Division. Excuse me. So we had the ComEd Energy Efficiency Program on our radar for a few years, heading into the bulk of the design of the new public works facility. We were able to work with some of ComEd's consultants to identify some potential energy efficiencies that could then be incorporated by our design team into the new facility, some of which are listed under the background section of the memo. Items such as windows, HVAC, lighting, things like that. So while the grant itself isn't a huge bonus, about $20,000, it is nice to see that these measures, they did quantify those, as you saw in the reservation letter that was attached to this item, that in addition to the actual incentive money, we are looking at saving about $30,000 a year in energy use as well. So it's kind of a no-brainer. There was no cost to us to get in on this program, and our designers didn't need to add any fees or anything. So we're happy about that, and take any questions.
Questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
A motion to approve.
We have a motion by Alderman
Second.
Bates, second by Alderman Warman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
It passes 5-0. Next one is 24-0601, a resolution authorizing revisions to the Finish Line Grant Program administered by Invest Aurora.
Good afternoon, Chairman Franco, committee members. Trevor Dick, Assistant Director of Economic Development. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. I'm joined with Chris Faber from Invest Aurora today, and as Alderman Franco said, the purpose of this presentation is to seek your approval in amending the Finish Line Grant Program to reposition it to be more effective in its intent of supporting local businesses, fostering economic growth, and improving the community as a whole. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Chris, who will walk us through the background and the discussion as well as the specific request items.
Thank you. Chris Faber, Invest Aurora. So a little bit on background. program has been around since 2015. When it was originally started, it was fully funded by the TIF districts in downtown Aurora, so therefore was geographically limited to downtown Aurora. It's undergone a few changes throughout the years. A couple of years ago, the TIF district started to expire. At that point, it was opened up citywide because the city became a different funding source coming from some general funds, moved over to the city to be administered through there. Through some changes, it was decided that, Invest Aurora is kind of built and designed for administering loan programs, grant programs, things like that. So this year, it's been rolled back to Invest Aurora. You all remember we were in front of you in May approving the funds transfer and all of those things. So we opened up the grant program, ran through June and July. We have 12 applicants that came in and applied. Once we sat down and started going through the applications and looking at the revisions that had been put into it when it was transferred over to us, what we've ended up finding was that there were places where we could maybe get more money into the hands of Aurora businesses. There were some restrictions initially that were put on there. After working with MOED and our internal team and our review committee, we think the nature of the program did not mean to restrict it as much as some of the language included. A couple examples, one of the things was all of the things that were approved for payout for the grant had to be permanently affixed to the building. That leaves in some interpretation, what is permanently affixed. In the past, this has always been eligible for if somebody's building a restaurant and they need to buy kitchen equipment, stoves, refrigeration, things like that. That has always been an eligible expense. Are those things permanently affixed to the building? It feels like it's a little gray, like they're plugged in. Sometimes that's all they are, right? So we want to just clarify that, no, those are included in this. It doesn't have to be, welded to the building, things like that. I think the nature of the program was always to include those. So we're bringing forth a few changes today just to sort of make sure we codify those things into the language. I have a few bullet points, Chairman, if you'd like me to go
Sure.
through those.
Please.
Okay, so first we have sales of food and beverage tax. So in this year's version, we had initially said that it was restricted to businesses whose majority of their income is sales tax or food and beverage tax generated. The couple things came out of that we started to find when we were looking through applications. In the past, we have allowed, in our downtown specifically, if there is a mixed-use building and they are taking an old building, finishing out the first floor into commercial space and the second floor into residential space. Under this, we weren't sure if the residential space really would count toward that program. It always has been, and we think that it should be. We all know that one of the biggest things that the downtown economy can use is more residents. We're 100% occupied. Every building down here has a waiting list. That's awesome news. But so therefore, if people are creating more residential space in the downtown, we want to be able to support that. So that's one of the changes that we have in. Moving on, it is increasing the amount. So this was originally written at a 20% match. And at the time, we were still kind of figuring out the details around prevailing wage. We have now, after discussions with our attorneys and the city's attorneys, this is 100% a prevailing wage program. So in order to help accommodate some of the additional costs that come with paying prevailing wage on smaller projects, we have increased the labor reimbursement portion to 30%. So 20% on materials, things like that, 30% on the labor side, but obviously prevailing wage is required for anything that they submit to us for reimbursement. Clarifying equipment under eligible expense, that's kind of what I mentioned earlier. Things like restaurant equipment, it's some things that are important and necessary to the function of your business, but aren't necessarily permanently attached to the building itself. Remaining consistent with prevailing wage, we just clarified some language to make sure that we are very clearly stating that this is a must on prevailing wage. And then increasing the minimum allowable project. This came through just discussion with our attorneys and everybody. At $5,000 on a 20% reimbursement, that's $1,000 getting back into the business's hands. Any money we can help our businesses with is great, but by the time we have the attorneys come up with the documents and everything, we're almost at a little bit of a net loss on only $1,000. So it was decided to bump that up to a $10,000 minimum just to make it a little more worth the effort. I will say, of the 12 people that have applied so far, they're all above that threshold, so this doesn't knock anything out. I would also like to note on that, of the 12 that have already applied, nobody would lose anything that they would have already gotten. So they're going to get their reviews after this goes through, if it does go through, and at that point, this probably will likely allow some more funds to go to certain people. We're not taking anything away from any of the people who have currently applied. And the last thing, the rolling basis. We really found that, trying to confine this to like a 1 month application period becomes challenging. We work with people all year long, and we don't want to have to go to somebody and be like, well, the application period closed last week. Now you got to wait till maybe next spring, next quarter, whatever that may be. Oftentimes we don't even have that next date set. So it just sort of restricts things, and we didn't want to do that. We want to be, if there's funds in the program, we want them to be eligible. So the idea here is to continue this on a rolling basis. Next year, if City Council decides to put more funding to this in their budget, then come 2025, there will be X amount of dollars in that, and it's rolling and it's available as people go. So, as they're granted, it comes out of the pool, but we can continue to work it that way. So those are the main changes. Obviously, I'm here for any questions you might have.
Questions or comments from the committee? Alderwoman Bay.
Thank you, Chairman. Are there any changes in how you're reaching out to businesses about the grant programs?
Not significantly. We will continue to do outreach, and obviously we will, now we'll kind of fire up the outreach again, because everything last time, it's a different style of marketing when it's a 1 month program. Everything was kind of geared toward that. Now that it's ongoing, between the Mayor's Office of Economic Development and our office, we every week are talking to businesses about their needs, about who's coming into town, things like that. We have the EDA loan program and the Dunham loan program, so we're always kind of in conversations about financial aspects of things. Having this as a rolling program, now this is another, it's another arrow in our quiver. So when we're having those conversations, it's not like, well, here's a loan program, here's a different loan program, and there might be funding for a Finish Line Grant program next year, but we can't do that right now. Now that is a living, breathing program on a continuous basis, so we'll be able to continue to use that, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, do we have a motion? Go ahead, Alderman Tolliver.
Thank you, Chairman. So, quick question. So, looking at the information that we have, I know that, we're going to be weighting this kind of towards restaurants and businesses that generate sales tax and food, beverage tax, which makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say I'm a barber shop or a photography studio that wants to open up. From what it sounds like, is there really any benefit or any reason for like one of those type of businesses to try to apply for this?
So under the way it was previously written, they were just kind of out without any question about it. And we kind of were taking the approach of, we don't want people to just be flat ruled out before they even get to apply. We have a loan committee, loan and grant committee that goes through and approves these based on a grading scale, and that grading scale takes into account what is the need of the area they're going into, what is the need of the Aurora economy in general. So the thought process behind it now is that they can apply. The grant committee may look at that and be like, hey, there are 6 barbershops already in this vicinity. We don't necessarily need that type of business in this location. So they might get declined because of that. That'll be done on a grading scale. So the people who get approved to have a certain score, they may have a lower score because the economy doesn't dictate that that's a needed business in that area. But they're not flat out forbidden. They at least have a chance to get in and make their pitch now.
Okay. And then secondly, I don't think it was in this packet. It may have been something I was reading just about Investor Aurora in general. But when it comes to the reimbursements for like the labor work that was done, I remember reading something before that stated it had to be like union workers or something along those lines.
It has to be prevailing wage.
Okay,
So
so
you do
that's
not have to
okay.
hire a union labor, but you do have to pay the prevailing wage to whatever laborer you hire.
Perfect. So it could be like if I just need floors done, I could just use a licensed contractor that does flooring
And as long as-
the prevailing wages
Right.
is. Okay.
Any receipt we get needs to be paid at prevailing wage.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Anybody else? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion by Alderwoman Bade.
Second.
Second by Alderman Tolliver. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Before we move on, we'll let the record show that Alderwoman Bade has another commitment, so she'll be leaving the committee right now. Next item on the agenda is 24-0605, discussion of matters related to the formation and making of a recommendation as to fixing of compensation of elected officials pursuant to the Local Government Officer Compensation Act. Alex, did you, okay. I didn't know if you want to start us off on that.
Good afternoon, Alex White from the Mayor's Office. I don't have a presentation for you. The attachment or the item before you is the report that was compiled by Korn Ferry at the request of the Finance Committee that was approved by the City Council back in July. So you do have the report of their findings. I do want to point out the findings do not include recommendations. This is just the outcome of their research. And we do have a representative from Korn Ferry who is here with us virtually to actually walk you through the report. So unless there are any questions, I will just go ahead and turn it over.
I would suggest we listen to him. I mean, we're going to have pretty good discussion here, I think, in a few minutes, but let's
Great.
let him go through his portion, and I think it'll generate more questions later on. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank
So
you.
I see him on my screen, and hopefully all you.
Sounds good. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll go ahead and would you like me to share the report? I can share my screen. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. or if
So
you've got
I
it.
just want to say real quick, we can hear you, but it's kind of low. If there's a way you can speak louder or turn it up the volume on your end. I don't know if that's our side or your side thing.
Let me take a look and see what I can do. I can try to speak louder if that helps.
Always.
Okay. Well, I'll speak as loud as I can. How's that?
Okay, sure.
Okay. So, hi. Thank you for having me. Tim Huff with Korn Ferry. We were asked to do a compensation analysis for base pay for mayor as well as aldermen. That's the report I'm going to share with you right now. So we were engaged to benchmark pay for both of those positions by comparing to positions of similar size or from positions at comparable cities. For comparison, we established a custom peer group, and we gathered publicly available data for the roles of mayor and alderman for each of those cities that were included in the peer group. The initial peer group consisted of about 23 cities in the Midwest. Cities were evaluated for inclusion in the final group based on comparable form of government, population, similar community makeup, median household income, and city budget to the extent possible, as well as the availability of relevant data. Form of government and population received the most weighting in our evaluation. The larger peer group was presented to the city and narrowed to 10 cities upon their review and approval of our recommendations. Comparison of base pay was made to the aggregated peer group data at the 25th, 50th, and 75th percentiles, as well as the average. I will pause there for a moment. Any questions on how we approached this analysis?
Questions from the committee? Nope. Continue on.
Excellent. Thank you. So next slide is the results of the benchmarking for mayor. So we compared annual salary for the mayor of Aurora to a group of 10 peer cities in the Midwest. As a city, Aurora ranks in the top quartile of population and most recently published annual budget compared to the peer group. Annual salary, so this is the headline, annual salary for the mayor of Aurora ranks at the top, meaning the maximum of the peer cities. You will see that Naperville and Elgin are included at the bottom. This is because those cities are commonly used for comparison by the city of Aurora. However, they're not included in the peer group based on, based on their form of government. Okay. And so what this analysis tells us, we've got our peer group, all of these 10 cities, where they're located, the population of each, current city budget, the annual pay for each mayor at that city. You can see that we've got summary stats, 75th median average, 25th percentile. You've got Aurora at the bottom in bold. In terms of population, Aurora ranks 83rd percentile for population. It's one of the biggest cities within this group. In terms of budget, you're at 76th percentile. Again, one of the bigger budgets within this group. Annual pay for mayor is at the maximum of this group at 177,424. Those are the results of the analysis for mayor compared to this peer group. I'll pause there for questions.
Questions from the committee on this so far? Continue on, we're good.
Okay. Alderman, similar analysis. Korn Ferry compared annual salary for aldermen of Aurora to a group of 10 peer cities in the Midwest. The peer group remains the same. Again, as a city, Aurora ranks in the top quartile of population and most recently published annual budget compared to the peer group. Annual salary for aldermen of Aurora ranks near the median of the peer cities, so right in the middle. Naperville and Elgin are again included for reference, but have been excluded from the actual peer group based on their form of government. Those are included because they are commonly used for comparison by the city of Aurora. The percentile ranking for population and city budget remain the same at 83rd percentile, 76th percentile, respectively. Annual pay for aldermen ranks at the 44th percentile. We also included the number of aldermen within each of those cities. Aurora ranks at the top of that list, having 12 aldermen, versus the next closest. Actually, I take that back. I'm sorry. I will correct that and get you a revised report. It is near the top, but it is not at the top. Warren, Michigan is at the top at 14 aldermen. So the headline here, pay for aldermen, City of Aurora approximates the median of the market, or the median of the peer group, rather. I'll pause there for questions.
Since we're going to talk about this anyway, anybody have any questions on the actual data before we break it down ourselves?
Just a point of clarification. I believe you said Warren, Michigan had 14, but I'm looking at 7 with Rockford.
I'm sorry.
14.
It's Rockford that has
Okay,
14.
just wanted to make sure. Okay.
You're right. Sorry. Yep. No, that's correct. Sorry.
Any other questions? Okay, continue.
Okay. The remainder of the slide deck is dedicated to the peer group and peer group development. So wanted to make sure that the committee is clear on how we went about this. So this is a little bit more in terms of the methodology. So we have our peer group documented in the back. We then also wanted to list out other cities that we considered, but ultimately did not move forward with as part of the peer group. This is a group of 13 that were part of the larger initial group, and through a process of elimination, mostly due to form of government or population, decided against including or recommending for inclusion.
Questions on this?
Yes.
Alderman Bug, go ahead.
Thanks for the information so far. One of the things that we discussed going into this was the difference where there's, I mean, we just take Naperville as an example. They don't have a strong mayor, but also their aldermen or their city council members are all elected at large, and they do not have individual districts. Was individual districts, was that taken into account with the analysis?
That was not a factor in selecting the peer group.
Okay.
That's a problem.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Is there anything more that you need to present to us? Because I think what we're going to get down to is what we always get down to, is we're going to look at data and say, what is the most pertinent data to get us to a pay scale that's fair and reasonable for both us and the residents, obviously. So do you have any more that you want to throw at us from your report?
There is nothing further in the report.
Okay. All right. Are you going to stay with us as we hash this out a little bit? We may have questions along the way.
Yeah, I can
Okay,
if you wish.
okay. All right. So, based on all this data, and it's great data, thank you so much for this, because, and I'm going to open this up to the committee, but based on what I've seen from this, I will say the last 2 cycles that we've done this, been pretty good. We've been pretty, you know, not using the professional Korn Ferry type of thing, but using data that we've accumulated for the mayor's office and ourselves to coming up with a fair pay based on, you know, what we do and how much we do and stuff like that. I think we're pretty much at a sweet spot on both. So I want to say good for the committee over the last couple of years doing that job to get us here. Having said that, there are a number of statistics to look at coming up with this. I can make the case right now for staying the same, going ahead, and even pulling back. So I think I would like to hear from the committee on your initial thoughts on what you've seen in this, and we could go through the mayor first, and then maybe we'll go through the aldermanic thing. So let's just start with the mayor's salary. Anybody have any thoughts on that going forward? Okay. All right. Well, all right, we'll come back to that because I think it's going to tie into the other one. Let's go to the aldermanic one. There's a number of stats in here for aldermen, which we have a better sense of chiming in about because we do that. This is what we do for a living. So comments or questions about what you see in the data going forward and what you think is appropriate, you know, based on where we're at today, based on where we want to be 4 years, well, not even 4 years from now, but for the next cycle. Questions, comments? All right, well, then I'll start it off. So as I look at this, there's a number of ways to look at this. I don't really put much weight into, and we haven't, for type of government, because if you have a strong mayor or a weak mayor and you're an alderman, you're still representing people, so I don't know how that factors in. I don't know how you factor in what the budget is, because if we're representing 17 to 20,000 people, regardless of what the budget is, the calls for my neighbor's got a problem or my street needs to be cleaned is the same thing there too. So I don't put a whole lot of weight into that. What I had been looking at, I think we've been looking at as a committee in the past, is how many aldermen we have per how many people we represent. And then what is the salaries based on others around us for this position? And I think, but the extra one on this I think is kind of good too, is cost of living. So for example, if we say, hey, we're kind of like this town in Indiana. The town in Indiana's cost of living is much less than ours. Should we be the same as them because it costs more to live in the Chicagoland area versus central Indiana? So those are the things that I kind of like to see in there, but I want to make sure that if we're going to compare ourselves to a city whose cost of living is much less, then we have to take that into consideration. I mean, those are the kind of things I was looking at. So and the other thing is too, I want to point out on this particular sheet, it shows here that we're making $23,660. Well, that's not really correct. I would say, and I broke this down, an alderman has about 90 meetings a year to go to, which they make $90 per meeting. Let's just say you miss 10 of them. I think that would be appropriate, and I'm going low. That's about $7,200 on top of that. So I think when we look at our annual pay, and I don't know if these other ones get per diems, we think not, that we're basically about $31,000. So when I look at that number, I'm looking at $31,000 for us. I'm not looking at $23,360 because we get $90 a meeting. So based on that, the other thing that I was looking at too is what we had done in the past is we felt the aldermanic pay and the mayor pay 2 cycles ago was low. We just did. So we had the task of getting it to where we thought the sweet spot would be, being where we should be, so then going forward, we can give incremental 2.5% to 3% raises because that's kind of what the market always calls for. So I felt we got there. And then over the last 4 years, the CPI shows about 18% as opposed to the normal 2.5% to 3%. So that's a big deal. So it jumped on us. So it was good that we pushed forward a little bit stronger. But based on what's happened recently, we're still a little bit behind. But nobody could forecast that. So as I look forward, if I look going forward, I think we need to take that into consideration, how much that inflation has jumped. We tried to keep up with it, but we were falling a little bit behind. So as I look at going forward, I'm going to look at how many people we represent compared to others, what our cost of living is, and where inflation has put us to the point where when we go forward, are we going to keep up with that? Or are we making up for that, the other thing too? And then one other thing I would also mention too, which is something I think we should consider, and this is a tough one, are we attractive enough in our compensation, and I guess we're just talking salaries here, not health insurance or anything else, to make sure that we have the best and the brightest to want to do these jobs? We know that it's a part-time job, and we know that people say, you know, for 30,000, no, but for 40,000, I might say yes. For health insurance, I may say yes. So these are variables that are always hard to figure out. But I think going forward, we do want to make us attractive enough that we don't have some really good person saying, yeah, it's just not enough for me to jump into that fray to do that part-time. So those are the things that I look at when we're going forward. So now, if I can open that up a little bit, and you guys get your thoughts about what data you want to see us go into, and what you, even if you have an amount in your mind going forward, what you think might be fair. Nobody? Go ahead.
I have a couple.
Alderman Warman.
A couple of questions or comments. So I'm looking at the one of the attached documents. So we do have cost of living built in already, like on page 4 of the aldermanic, I forget what it's called here, aldermanic compensation 21.
Mm-hmm.
So those from 24 to 25, looks like there's, I'll call it cost of living, I'm not sure what that is, but a 3% built in,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Correct.
So that's already in there. So we're just looking to overall maybe see if we adjust the base and leave the percentages alone.
Well, so, all right,
Or is
so this is
everything
gonna
wide
go
open?
through 2026, starting to 2027. So do we think that, starting at that time, that 580 plus $90 per meeting, which puts us, let's just say another 7,500, so that puts you about 32,000 in a couple of years from now, does that need to go up in 27, 28, 29, and 31? Do we, I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at, because we're set for until 2026. Nobody here right now is gonna make any of this money unless they run again and get reelected. So that's a good thing. So do we feel going forward in 4 years, that's gonna be something that we want to address, where we want to be? Now, again, as I said before, I think what our goal was the last couple cycles is to get us to where we should only need to have 2.5% to 3% increases. But because of what's happened the last couple of years, like 2 years, just in a 2-year period, it's gone up 14%. That's huge. Where many years it's like 1% to 3%. So do we need to make up for that a little bit in addition? So that's kind of what, I mean, that's what we're looking for here.
And healthcare the healthcare benefits has nothing to do with this as far as compensation wise, so.
So I can ask the fellow from Corn Ferry, you never took in consideration for if they're getting health insurance through work or anything like that, did you? I can't hear you right now. I didn't know if that was.
That's correct.
Okay.
That is correct. That was not a factor.
Okay, all right.
And to me, that's, in this day and age, that's a huge piece
Well,
of the pie, in my opinion, so.
I would agree, and
Yeah.
I would say that in my dealings in the past, people run for the health insurance.
Yeah.
I mean, I just have to be blunt about that.
Yeah,
I've
whether
heard
you
them say
run for
that.
this
So
or
there- so
anything.
there's, so that's a benefit too. So, again, you know, there's so many things we can throw into this. I'd like to keep the health insurance out just because
Well, to
how
me,
do you
then,
factor
you
that
gotta
in?
compare, if you're gonna compare apples to apples, I know in the private sector, I've taken less money for better healthcare benefits or vice versa, you know,
Right.
so whether I buy from the exchange or take advantage of that. So I think if we're looking at everything, I think we need to look at everything, you know. It's, to me, this is, like you said, if you decide you wanna run or not, you know, it's like, again, picking a job. They're offering 3 weeks vacation, they're offering 4, they get this company car, you know, a mileage reimbursement, everything that comes along with that kind of stuff, to me is the compensation package. So to me, to look at just the salary, I feel we're not getting the whole picture to compare everything, because there may be 21,000, or maybe 32,000 at some other city, but they get 0 health benefits,
Right.
you know, or no mileage reimbursement, or any of that kind of thing, or the $90 or something like that. So to me, this is, I'm sure we gave them the direction, but I think we as whether it came from finance or whoever, that it should have been a whole picture, in my opinion, to make a true decision, in my opinion.
So I would ask Alex, if Alex could come back up here too, and then we can kind of go through that to find out if additional data is needed. Is that something that we could get?
So based on the preliminary discussions with Human Resources who manage the contract, that would be an additional service that would be required, because that's a different, that's my understanding.
Okay. So, but in the past, I will say this, in the past, we really didn't take, we're trying to compare. Now, if you don't want to, if we don't compare, it's an easy one. But if you're trying to say, what do we compare to South Bend or Warren, Michigan, or wherever, then you really need to have all that information. If we're saying what is fair and reasonable just for us based on what we do, which we can do, because we can do anything, then we wouldn't need that as much. We just say, is our package for a part-time job reasonable for what we do? So there's different ways to go with that.
And I'd agree with your point too, as well as, take into cost of living, whether you live in Chicago or you live in Plano or if you live in the middle of, Indiana, obviously that factors into it as well too. So I think, to me, the bottom line is if we're doing anything with this, we'd have to decide, like what we feel is, we attracting the best and brightest with the package that we have. Because I think we could punch holes in comparisons and this and that, although it's nice, but I think with this one lacking, to me, the biggest piece healthcare compensation, I think, is comparing ourselves to anybody else's, not knowing what they offer. I think is a huge thing because healthcare is such a huge factor for everybody. So,
but I will say this, and I agree with that. But I will say this: I don't have the healthcare, so it's not everybody takes the healthcare. So that's, I'm going to say most do, but I did not take, as I have it through the federal government. So, that's something to consider too. If you don't have it, so my compensation wouldn't be as much.
Yeah.
So, probably most people do, but it's not all encompassing.
And with the playing devil's advocate, then that's, like you said, you're at the tail end of your career and you're able to get that, but an up-and-coming family, with younger kids and trying to, this is a big deal, and it attracts the best and brightest, like with anything else. So.
Well, and there's another thing. I mean, there's so many different variables. I'll throw another variable out there. You get elected one time, you get your health insurance for 4 years. You don't get elected next time, your health insurance is gone. So, you're rolling the dice in that a little bit too. So, there's just, I mean, this is why it's always a difficult one. There's so many variables in there, and which ones do you put the most weight on? Or how do you compare somebody that's not taking health insurance versus somebody that does? So I just want to throw that out there. There's a couple motions on here. If we're going to move forward today, I don't think we will, because I think we need to digest that. But I just wanted to get the talks going on how we've looked at it in the past, how I personally look at it. Everybody looks at it differently, what I would put weight on based on what we do. But at the end of the day, I really think that if we're going to compare, and health insurance is a tough one, if we're representing 20,000 people apiece, per alderman, that's kind of what I'm looking at, as far as workload. And it really comes down to workload. Those are not, if we're only representing 10,000 people per, a lot less. So that's where I go. And the cost of living thing too, when we're going to go us versus a town in Indiana where the cost of living is different. So if I had to throw out numbers today, and this is just for the alderman, based on the last 4 years of being about 18%, I would say, would it be reasonable to throw a 4% a year on starting in 2027, because that kind of catches us up with that 18. I look forward to what they think the CPI is going to be going forward. They think it's going to level off to 3%, but we took this hit for at least for 2 years for 14%, and overall for 18%. So I right off the top of my head, 4% came into my mind just because of that. So that's how I'm looking at it. That's we're going forward. I think everybody's going to have to go back and take a look at some stuff about that. The mayor's one, he's at the high end. Now, I shouldn't say he, it could be a she because it's for the next term. Since they're at the high end, I would say that we probably, in my mind, we would go less. So like even that first year, if you saw with the last cycle, we went 0. That was out of COVID, so we went 0. So I could see us going like a 0, 1, 2, 3 because they're up there anyway, but at a certain point in time, they have to keep it, moving forward a little bit. So the preliminary, in my mind, when I saw these numbers without talking to the committee, that's what I was thinking. And I think that puts us in what we've done historically. Unfortunately, Korn Ferry has kind of basically solidified what we had done. It keeps us in the ballpark. That's good. We're not outrageously high or outrageously low. So I think that was a nice fundamental, those are fundamental numbers to work with. So I would open for any more comments, unless somebody feels that we're ready to go today, or definitely say we're not. I would say we're not. And we have time. We have until November. We really want to get this done by October, so still that's enough time. And really, I think what'll come out of this particular committee, when we go to COW, will be I don't think there'll be a whole lot of pushback on it. I think it's gonna be fair. And I don't wanna get into perception issue, because it's always hard to talk about giving yourself a raise, but when we say yourself, it's not ourself, it's a position, so we have to keep that in mind too. So is there any other comments, questions about what we're doing here today?
Yeah.
Alderman Buck.
Thank you. Let me start and jump back in with the report. And Alderman Franco made some excellent comments. So my major thing in trying to get comparisons, and with the 10 that we chose, unfortunately, population-wise, the jump is from 148,000, and then it's 265. A difference in there of almost 120. So huge gap, and we're in the middle of the gap. We got down here at 203. So, in looking at that, I'm going to look at some of the ones that we took out. And there are some closer, and I think Des Moines is probably the closest. Des Moines and Grand Rapids is the closest. As Alderman Franco said, at least for me, I'm less concerned about the form of government as I am, kind of what you said, workload. So in a strong mayor situation or a city manager type situation, you can have your aldermen do virtually the same thing. If you have a strong mayor, if you have a case manager, if you are over a district, we call them wards, your workload could be exactly the same, no matter what the mayor's doing. So to me, that is not as much of a factor. Certainly, and I appreciate, you put in here the population. On the other ones, you put in the number of aldermen. I'm skipping sheets here. So my looking at this is I'm looking at those, Grand Rapids, Des Moines, the ones that are closer. And perhaps, I don't have my notes from the last time, perhaps there are more that are right near 200,000 where we could take a more in-depth look. To jump to Alderman Warman, unfortunately, I think when we asked Ms. Voigt, who pushed this forward, it was asked to us, and I don't think we pushed on the healthcare aspect. So, and we didn't push on per diem per meeting. I know that, I won't say all, but most, virtually all, city council, county board, they get some type of pay per meeting. What that amount is, all over the board, but that's not unusual that we get, an amount per meeting. That's kind of standard, even for smaller situations. So, I guess we're looking at where we fall. The mayor falls toward the top, and we fall at about, about 44% or so. So those numbers, again, we're looking 2 years in the future. So you have the built-in that we did last time to take us up to 26, and then looking forward. So I think those are kind of the things we need to consider. I wish we, and we can do some of our own research too, but I think that's one of the biggest factors. If you're going to find your work product, and I only use Naperville because we know it, and they're next door, they are elected at large. And so when a issue or that comes up, it's an at-large issue, which at least the ward aldermen understand. At-large issues are very different than ward issues, very different, drastically different. And so that's a big consideration.
Right. And the other thing I did do too, and I think this would be good, when we're trying, at the end of the day, we have to try to find in our minds what a good comparable is, what we're gonna weight on it. So when I looked at Warren, Michigan, I looked at 7 aldermen for 135,000 people, 19,000 people per alderman they gotta represent. And I look at Toledo, Ohio, 29,400 per alderman. And Fort Wayne, 22,600. Those numbers to me, because they're the easiest to kind of look at, make the most sense for us to put the most weight on, because those are black and white. They represent 22,000, and we represent maybe 20. I got 17 to 20,000, but I got one for, if we count 12 aldermen, but really it's 10 aldermen because it's geographic. So I would put us at 20,000. So how do we compare to them? That's the easy way. Now there's obviously more, but you want to break it down as simple as possible. You're going to have some caveats and some amendments to that, but that's how I would try to look at it going forward. And if I take our 23,660 and I add 7,200 to it, we're certainly no longer in the 44 percentile. We're up there, which is fine because we should be. So that's why I want to take that all consideration. So I think my point of this is it's not easy, and there's just a lot, and we're only going to have so much information to compare with. We didn't take in the health insurance last time. We can, but again, there's variables there too. We don't know what everybody else does when we compare, but we don't have to compare. Comparing is nice, but we don't have to. So we didn't have any of this information. So what is a fair salary? We can move forward, make our case, and go on. So I think there's going to be a lot of hybrid on this and how we come to our conclusion. It's not going to be absolute. There's going to be some wrangling with it, but I think if we kind of go what we've done in the past, I think we're pretty good. So any other questions, comments on that? So what I would suggest is we'll take into consideration what we heard today. Alderman Lashk, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question for Corn Ferry, because I don't know if they'll be here when this reaches the at-large discussion, but I saw you nodding your head when Alderman Bug was talking about the per diems being pretty standard. I'm just assuming that was not considered as part of your formula.
It's no, it was not. It is certainly an element of data that we can collect. Oftentimes it's difficult to standardize what that means in this context. We may have very different per diems or even meeting fees. I think you're referring to maybe meeting fees. Different meeting fees maybe for different committees. You may have some committees may meet a lot, some committees may meet not very often. So there's a question of maybe some standardization. How do we standardize that to really compare apples to apples? And that was a little bit beyond what kind of we were tasked with. It is something we can go that extra mile, and maybe the easiest thing to do, or kind of a quick thing to do, is to just collect what those meeting fees are, right? Can we get to how many meetings they have? Yes, but is it really going to tell us a lot? Because that annual pay, it then becomes dependent on multiple variables, and then becomes more difficult to kind of, like I said, compare apples to apples.
Sure.
So we were really only looking at what is that annual pay that is provided to each alderman.
Sure. And I was just looking for a short, yes, that's standard. confirmation to your head nodding. But I also wanted to ask, was there any consideration for full-time or part-time, or did you not even look at it because it was beyond the scope?
To my knowledge, I can go back and double check, but to my knowledge, full-time versus part-time is not a consideration.
Okay, I was wondering just because of Indiana's numbers. Other than that, I would just say, while I'm not a member of this committee, I generally agree with the direction that the chairman's saying, that the aldermen are in the middle and should be moving higher, and the mayor's at the top end, and we can pull back there a little bit. So I generally agree with that. And my only other comments, Mr. Chairman, is at some point, as you guys discuss this at this committee level, a consideration that as the city grows and you continue to represent more people, I know that other alder people have considered moving this position to a full-time position and have said that the workload is a full-time workload. And you might discuss creating a full-time position or a hybrid where the alderman can choose whether they want to be a full-time alderman, maintain office hours, regular office hours, or somebody that has a career in a profession, or in Mr. Worman's case, has multiple restaurants or a higher salary and doesn't want to give up their professional career, could serve in a part-time status. That's just for your deliberation. But in general, I think that you're on the right track as far as increasing compensations. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, so I think we got, some thoughts to think about. At the end of the day, it's not gonna be perfect. We're not gonna be able to compare absolute to absolute. But I think we have a nice amount of information to kind of go on based on her historical perspective. It's kind of nice to know where we are. I would ask too, if you could, are we done with Corn Ferry as far as collecting data? Because I don't think we need to know how many meetings anybody goes to, but if we can know how much they got per meeting, we can extrapolate that into maybe a little bit better in comparables. Because I don't want to say that we're at 31,000 because we got about 80 meetings. We go to a $90 a meeting, and think, yeah, but everybody else does too. So our 31 is still the 44 percentile as opposed to being the 70 percentile. So if we could get that would help. We don't need to know how many meetings because you're getting paid for the job you're doing. So if you go to 2 meetings, you only get paid for 2 meetings. So I don't think we need to know how many, just how much they get paid per. Yeah, if that's a possibility.
We can certainly do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would help us. I just, at the end of the day, we want to be correct, because when you're talking about public perception, we want to say, when we make this decision, we want to say we made it because, and we took this, that, and the other thing in consideration. So the more we can get would be better too for the public.
Yeah, happy to provide you whatever you need to help inform your decision.
Okay, all right. Well, then I would suggest that we take this information, we got 2 weeks, we'll come back, digest it a little bit, maybe come back potentially to go over some real numbers to present the city committee of the whole. We still got a little time, so I don't have a problem with that. So these other motions there on the agenda we won't even utilize today. We'll just put this as discussion next time, and we'll put those motions on there for the following time because we may be ready to go forward after the next meeting. Is everybody good with that? Okay, all right. Is there anything else to come before the Finance Committee today?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn by Alderman Warman, second by Alderman Tolliver. All in favor say aye. Aye. And thank you for Corn Ferry for coming out today and getting that information. Really appreciate that. All right, we are adjourned at 4:09. Thank you.